This is the Bryan Hyde Show.
Well, hello there and welcome to the show. It's a Tuesday, and that's my day when I sit down and I visit with my friend Eric Peters from Eric Peters Autos. Eric, how are you this fine day?
Well, I'd like a medal. Will somebody give me a medal, please? Do you remember when we were kids, there was this cheesy cartoon called The Wacky Races? Do you remember The Wacky Races?
I kind of do.
So there was this character who was kind of like a snidely whiplash guy, and he had this dog, and the character's name was Muttley. And Muttley always wanted a medal, you know, to get him to do something. Muttley, do you want a medal? And then the dog would be, you know, ecstatic and over the moon. There's another example that's interesting. This is just a little historical footnote. Back during World War II, Hermann Goering was infamous for loving medals, and he was beside himself when Joachim von Ribbentrop, the German foreign minister, got I think it was the Order of the Annunzi or something like that from Mussolini. I mean, he was furious. He was apoplectic that he got passed over and didn't get one. So he badgered Mussolini until Mussolini finally gave him his coveted award.
Yeah, for those who may not be aware, the letter that President Trump sent to, was it the president of Norway? Do they have
Yes.
do they have a king? I don't know. Anyway, he sent it to the leaders of Norway saying, well, since you didn't give me, the Nobel Peace Prize medal, peace isn't really, my biggest priority now. And, there's a part of me that, I guess this is the part that wants to believe that somehow adults are in charge and we're not just, at the whim of whoever happens to be in the Oval Office. Maybe there is some great strategic value to Greenland, but it sure seems like we're back to that might makes right kind of mentality, which is very scary because it isn't always going to be the Donald sitting there in that Oval Office.
Well, if we take his comments at face value, it seems as if this whole thing is being driven by personal pique. He is affronted that he didn't get the medal that he believes that he deserves, which is bizarre in and of itself, given how many wars he's started over the last couple of weeks and months. But nonetheless, so because he's personally irritated about not having gotten this Nobel Peace Prize, we're gonna turn around and attack and take and seize Greenland. So this is the sort of leadership that now governs the United States. It's always been implicit, but now it's overt out there. And it's just deranged. It's like an almost 80-year-old petulant child stomping his feet and saying, well, if you don't give me what I want, I'm going to stop being peaceful. And then he curls his lips and bares his fangs.
It's a scary place to be. And what's scariest of all isn't so much, Donald Trump. Look, he's one guy, like you mentioned, almost 80 years old, but it's the true believers. And sadly, I have a lot of friends. I have family that are true believers looking for any reason to hang on. And the very fact that you and I are actually saying, wait a minute, is this really in our best interest? Is this based in sound principles? That makes us the enemy because we're questioning, I guess, the dear leader.
Well, I like to think that we're ahead of the curve on this one, just like you and I were ahead of the curve back in 2020 when it came to COVID, and also going back even farther to the George W. Bush era, same thing. So I'm not particularly concerned about the fact that we're sort of in the minority right now. And when I talk to my red-hatted friends, I ask them how they can imagine that this police state that they seem to crave won't be turned around to police them.
Yeah, and especially, look, I understand that immigration was weaponized, particularly under the Biden administration. There is no doubt millions of people were brought in and flooded throughout the country to help affect voter numbers, to get them registered. I mean, it was to further the growth of the federal government and especially the welfare part of it. There's no doubt about that, but it is so disturbing to see people clamoring for blood on the right, these leftists, these people out there protesting and threatening and attacking. And yes, they are threatening and attacking these federal immigration officers. But I don't know if many people on the right are actually picking up on how much boot leather they're getting a taste of right at the moment.
Well, if this is a law enforcement operation, i.e. these people are here illegally, then it's fundamentally a police operation. So why are soldiers, in effect, patrolling the streets? It's a bit much. The visuals of it are bad. And it's also just fundamentally ineffective. Trump claimed that in the first year of his presidency, this second term, something like 74,000 illegals have been captured and sent back. Well, that's a drop in the bucket. The low end estimate of the number of people that have come into the country illegally during the Biden era was something like 10 million. So let's take that 74,000 or 75,000 and times it for the next 3 years. You got about 300,000 people versus 10 million. It's irrelevant. It's not going to materially change anything. So these tactics are unsound. They're not going to accomplish the stated reason. So that's troublesome. Again, the whole police state thing is very troubling. Did you catch the news? It's all over X, by the way, about what's going on in Florida. Apparently, police have been sent to knock on people's doors, like in England, over their mean tweets.
Oh, actually, I did catch a video yesterday. So what kind of tweets are sparking this concern?
I think it has something to do with expressing sympathy for the Palestinians. In other words, it's anti-Semitic, something along those lines. Because DeSantis is, of course, one of those guys who's gone over to pay homage at the wall and done the head bobbing thing, right, to show who really runs his operation. Just like that whole thing is bizarre to me. To think that our political class, our leadership, has to go to a foreign country and perform a religious ritual. That never happens in reverse, does it?
No, and again, I'm not trying to say this like, oh yes, the wise old sage who sees it all that nobody else can see, but we're being put on the horns of a dilemma, meaning it's a false dilemma. Look, you're either 100%. I think the phrase you use is Israel über alles, or you're anti-Semitic. No, there's room for criticism. There's room for observation, and the same thing with immigration. You can be perfectly okay with reasonable restrictions on how and when and who is allowed to come into this country and work and live. And, that doesn't mean that you're sympathetic for terrorists or drug dealers or cartels or anything like that. But we're not allowed that. We're supposed to divide up into one of two camps. And I just hope, I'm encouraging people, if you get your emotions up at a video you see or a headline you see, take a moment and pause and ask yourself, am I being placed on the horns of a dilemma? Because there's always another option. I
agree with you. And it seems purposeful. We often hear the term 5D chess when it comes to Trump. Well, what if the whole purpose of this is to create incitement, to trigger something violent that will enable him to justify declaring martial law, to invoke the Insurrection Act? Yeah. I don't think that that's an unreasonable thing to speculate. The other alternative, as I see it, is that Trump is mentally ill. People on our side of the fence generally were troubled by Joe Biden during the last couple of years because it was evident that, he was not quite operating on all 8 cylinders any longer. He would mumble, he would get that vacant look in his eyes. Clearly, the man was no longer capable of being the president, and his own party recognized that, and that's why they shoved him aside for Kamala Harris. And we all cheered that, yay, it's time to get the senile old grifter out. Well, we could have the similar or very close kind of problem right now with regard to Trump. And nobody apparently, well, not nobody, but a lot of people on the same side who noticed Biden are apparently not willing to notice Trump. I think it comes down to that partisan mindset, because the concern that I hear you expressing, and I felt it too, seeing Biden, trotted around out there with handlers and unsure of which way to go or whether to sit or stand or poop his pants or whatever. We looked at that and went, that's elder abuse. It's not a matter of, well, he's a Democrat, of course he's doing something right. It was a matter of, why are they doing that? And I don't know that we can find that kind of detachment so easily among those who are supporters of Trump, or for that matter, those who are opposed to him and spend all their time, just dwelling on, well, everything he does, every breath he draws makes the world a worse place to live in. Well, it gets back to what you and I have talked about previously, which is how things have become so ideological, so rigid. And, there's this dividing line. There's left and right. And depending on which side of that line you fall on, you accept, justify, and rationalize just about anything. If it's your guy, if it's the other guy, then all of a sudden those things that you accept become unacceptable. And at the same time, the people who are in this mindset can't see their own cognitive dissonance. And that's a really alarming thing to me. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but I've had people accuse me of, you don't know what you believe. And they say that because apparently I haven't landed in their camp or I haven't landed in the enemy camp. Therefore, something is wrong with me, as opposed to, what if neither one of those camps really is anything that I can support? Sure. Well, I thought we all wanted to put America first. I don't see how it puts America first to get involved in wars that really are none of our concern. As far as I've been able to tell, nobody has pointed out anything that is in the interests of America to go to war with Iran, for example. It's in the interest of Israel, of course, but how is that in our interests? Iran has no capacity to strike the United States in any meaningful way. So again, what's in it for us? It's a perfectly reasonable question to ask. It's the kind of question that Trump himself asked when he was running for office. And this Greenland stuff, what the heck is that all about? I mean, unless it's just, we're going to snatch all those natural resources. That seems to be the only thing that makes sense to me. The old Cold War explanation is nonsense. China and Russia have hypersonic missiles. It's not 1943 any longer. Greenland is not strategically relevant in that context any longer.
No, that's a very good point. And isn't it interesting how much is couched in national security? Well, the reason we've got to be out there, involved in Syria, involved in this, involved in that, it's all about national security. Has nothing to do with my security. In fact, every time we seem to get involved like that, I feel less secure because my government seems less restrained by the laws that are supposed to keep it within its proper bounds.
Well, and also less obligated, and not that we ever were, but less obligated to pay taxes. Marjorie Taylor Greene is kind of starting this little revolt. It's a psychological revolt for now, but maybe it'll become an actual revolt, saying, what in the world are Americans doing, having to send money to the federal government that then spends it on anything and everything that is contrary to the interests of us, the American people? And she's got a very, very valid point, in my opinion.
Something else that I find noteworthy and more than just a little bit troubling, and that is the amount of people on the right who have chosen to travel to Minneapolis to go out there and represent. We're here to show you what's really happening on the ground. I think that they're going there because there's conflict and they want to be a part of that conflict. And basically, if they're looking for a fight, they're going to find one. They're being dragged out of their cars and beaten or pepper sprayed by leftist activists. And of course, the leftist activists are being beaten and pepper sprayed by ICE agents. It just seems to me a very foolish thing to go looking for that conflict. I'm not sure what contribution you're making to the cause of freedom by going out there and becoming a part of whatever violence is looking for someone to act against.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. Both sides are looking for a fight, in my opinion. And maybe that's exactly what the powers that be want. It reminds me of 1920s Germany. Again, the example is really relevant. You had street fights going on back then between the communists and the people on the right, the Freikorps, they were called. And, eventually the populace got so tired of the chaos of not being able to even walk the streets without having to worry about gangs of thugs attacking them, that they voted for the candidate who promised to restore order. And they got order, all right. And, we're probably going to get the same kind of order if history ends up repeating itself here.
I'm going to include a link in my show notes today from one of Paul Rosenberg's websites, and he talks about verbal self-defense. Now, look, I think an intelligent person, their chances of getting into a physical street fight are pretty low, unless, of course, you go out looking for it, in which case, good luck with that. But getting into a verbal altercation is very easy. In fact, it's so easy. All you have to do is look like you might be, a supporter of ICE, and you will have people hound you and chase you down and want to instigate something with you, depending on the city that you're in. And Paul offers some really solid advice about how to avoid getting caught up in a verbal furball. And the biggest part of it is, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier. When someone says something, that is intended to shock you or rock you back on your heels, do not respond instantly. That there's a moment, anything that makes you feel less secure or like, ooh, am I out of step or unsure of myself? That is your signal to pause, take a breath, and think before you say anything. And it's okay to say, you know what, this sounds more like an argument, or this sounds more like a fight than a discussion. I don't really want to do anything with that, and walk away.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say try not to engage. There's not much to be accomplished by engaging with random people that you don't know. You have no idea what their motivations are. You have no idea what they're capable of. You have no idea what they might do. It's fine to talk among your family and friends, people that you know, and can be at least somewhat confident that they're not going to attack you for saying something that they might not like. But, MYOB is not a bad policy when you're out and about in public, not to be provocative and not to draw attention to yourself. It's just, but at the same time, be aware of your surroundings. Don't look at the ground, look around you. be ready, anticipate, and do your best to, when your spider sense tingles and tells you that there's something up here that doesn't feel quite right, go the other way.
Hear, hear. I mean, look, it's not that we're trying to be pacifists and just totally, oh, look, I don't want to stand for it. I don't want to offend anybody. I'm perfectly willing to offend people by speaking the truth as I understand it. You know, offense isn't my goal, but I understand it's probably going to happen. Some people will take it that way. But you don't have to answer every invite, whether it's an invite to a struggle session from some leftist who is accosting you on the street, or whether it's somebody on the right wanting to make sure that ideologically you're pure enough to be one of my buddies. You don't have to take up that challenge. You can turn and walk away from it, and they really have no power over you other than what you allow.
Absolutely. And again, things can spiral out of control very, very easily these days. I see these videos on YouTube of these road rage incidents that quickly get out of control. Somebody gets annoyed that somebody cut somebody off, and instead of just arguing or giving the finger to people, they'll get out of their car and start attacking the person. And then sometimes maybe firearms are involved, and all of a sudden you're potentially talking about somebody being killed and potentially having to deal with the repercussions of that. Do you want that? Not a good idea. It's best avoided if possible.
Yep. I guess if I had to distill down what we're getting at here, it's think for yourself, be smart about where you put your mental and moral energy, and just, you don't have to answer every invitation that's thrown your way, because frankly, the videos that you see popping up are proof that there's a lot of unhinged people out there just looking for a reason to go off like a firecracker. Don't give them a reason.
And it's getting worse. And I think Trump, and this is what bothers me about him, unless he's just completely out of it mentally, he has to know that he's gratuitously goading these people. This stuff is not necessary. He's doing it like a bully does, to be provocative, to needle the people that he doesn't like. And what purpose does that serve? To make these, to amp it up, to make these people angry. What does he expect is going to happen? The more angry that he makes them gratuitously. It's not like, okay, he's putting forward a policy and they don't like the policy. Well, too bad you don't like the policy. He's mocking them, belittling them, daring them effectively to do something about it. That's not a good thing for us as a country.
Let's shift gears here just for a moment. There's another thing that I wanted to touch on before we have to wrap up today, and that is silver. Now,
oh boy.
I know not everybody's a precious metals bug, and frankly, I'm not as big a one as I wish I were. Now that I see the price of silver and gold, going to the moon. But I was looking at an article from Mike Maharrey from Money Metals Exchange. Silver now ranks as the second most valuable asset in the world, gold being number one. But if you look at assets, silver is on its way, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that. I mean, we're pushing up to $100 an ounce.
Yeah, well, it's nearly quadrupled in value over just about the last 2 years. You and I were talking a little bit about this off air, and I bought some coin about 2 years ago when it was $22 for a coin. So now it's nearly $100. And while that's great if you have some silver, the thing that isn't so great is that it's a barometer of the decline of the dollar. It's becoming precipitous. We're, I think, potentially about to enter the hyperinflation stage, because if you compare the worth of silver and gold relative to the buying power of the dollar, it's really alarming to think that one little silver 1 ounce coin is now equivalent in buying power to a $100 bill. The $100 bill is essentially worthless now. It's essentially worth what $20 was worth just 2 years ago. Consider that. That is like what, an 80% loss in value over the last couple of years.
Wow.
Relative to silver.
Yeah, that is the downside of precious metal prices going through the roof. There was another statistic, and this may have changed because it's been a couple of weeks since I heard this. Junk silver, so-called junk silver, 90% silver quarters and dimes. From what I understand, $1 in face value of those coins is now closer to $60 in value in terms of Federal Reserve notes. 4 quarters, $60. 10 dimes.
An ounce of gold is now approaching $5,000. 1 ounce of gold.
Wow.
And what was it back in 1900? I think an ounce was a $25 gold piece, I believe, right?
Yeah, or 20. I mean, it was something like $35 an ounce. I think when Roosevelt started confiscating it, or after he confiscated it.
An ounce of gold was not a small amount of money, but it wasn't a huge amount of money. You would maybe pay for dinner with an ounce of gold, let's say, something like that. Now you can almost buy a car with an ounce of gold.
Man, Again, I wish this was all good news of, yeah, this is so great. We're back on sound money. But no, this is showing how unsound what we call money actually is.
Yeah, and can you imagine the cattle are going to beat feet when one day, and I dread this, we're going to wake up and it's going to be all of a sudden, and the money, the dollars, money denominated in dollars will be essentially worthless, and people will be scrambling to get their money out of the banks and trying to convert it into something that is of value, tangible goods. Which will drive the price of those tangible goods through the roof. And you'll need even more of your paper dollars to buy anything. And then we'll get the CBD and the social credit score, digital money, complete panopticon control brought to us by Palantir and Donald Trump.
Wow. Well, all I can say is, folks, don't say that. Why didn't somebody say something? We are saying something.
Yeah.
And we're trying to say it as friends, not as, gotcha. One final question for you, Eric. I like to touch on things automotive when I have you on the show. And tell me what's happening in your world. First of all, tell me, how is your project going on your Trans Am?
Going really well. The flywheel is installed on the engine. And today, according to UPS tracking, I'm supposed to get my clutch and pressure plate.
All right.
So I will have that on by the end of the week, and I will do a video to show the progress of that. So at this point, all I really need is the bell housing and the transmission itself, and some linkages and a few little bits and pieces. But I say I'm past the halfway point right now to getting it done. I just hope that, money doesn't become worthless within the next couple of weeks, because I still need to get those parts. And if I can't, because I'm broke, like back in 1929 type of a situation, then I've got a, half-finished Trans Am that can't be driven.
In the words of Han Solo in the first Star Wars movie, you hear me, baby? Hold together. I'm feeling exactly the same way. Just stay together a little bit longer. Eric, great as always to visit with you. I hope it doesn't feel like too much of a gripe session to people, but this is serious stuff. And what we're really asking is, please think outside the box, lose the partisan blinders, and don't be hoodwinked into giving up what's most precious. Looking forward to our next conversation, my friend.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you having me on.
This is the Bryan Hyde Show.